Let me know when you got that. All right, we got it recorded. Today is Thursday. It's 11:30 a.m. March 5th AST time, and this is our block producer meeting number 2. I guess Eric asked me to do a little intro. Not much to say. I'm just, again, really excited about you guys all participating in FIO. Really, I've been on a lot of different calls with industry people about what we're building, and people are very excited about it. They see the need for it, and I really think we're going to bring usability to the whole space. So thank you all for your efforts. I'd like to just give another quick shout out to Igor. He's not on the call at the moment, but Igor has been really stepping it up to help us with some Genesis script stuff that we're working on. Of course, you know, Bowden and many others are working on that as well, but it's just super appreciate the community coming together. Very excited to see, you know, this kind of grassroots efforts as I see it. And of course, many of you are my friends that I've known for a long time. So it's cool to see you participating as well. Eric's got a couple slides he's going to show from just kind of give you an update on where we're at. And then I hope we can just have a larger Q&A session for any questions or concerns, or we talk things through. And then if we have extra time, you know, we can always end early. That's cool with me too. So Eric, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks. Oh, wait, I need to share here. One sec. All right. Hey, everyone. Yeah, no, I just have a couple slides. I'll move this off of here. Regarding our upcoming plans and some of the recent fixes we put into what we're updating, and then just a little bit on what we're trying to get to with mainnet here. So if everyone can see my screen. So testnet update, our goal is to do a restart probably next Tuesday. We're working with Bowden on timing, and as Luke mentioned, we're working with Igor. The goal of this one is to really do a release candidate for mainnet. This may be our last full restart unless something comes in. After this, we'll be doing some testing out of maybe updating some contracts with MSIGs and things like that. Or if there's bugs in, we'll just put those in via just kind of contract updates. But for a restart, the last one didn't have our full set of token tables and the token locking, and we have all those pre-sale domains and addresses, the FIO addresses and FIO domains that we sold in the pre-sale that we want to load up here, so everyone can start doing checking on all if they have any of those, if they exist. So we want to load all of that up like it's going to be mainnet. That's what we've been working with Igor. We had some older scripts we were using, but we're modifying our scripts and we'll be using those. I have a process I'll show you there that we have a draft process out there as well. There are some changes because this will be like a mainnet Genesis ABP. We do want to have the voting thresholds as well. I think our mainnet threshold is 65 million FIO voted to get to mainnet activation. We're going to be lowering that just because everyone won't be out there voting. We're not going to be doing a get out the vote for, like, our wallet members will have quite a bit of FIO that they're going to be voting as well. So I think we're going to be using a lot of the foundation and the internal accounts as our faucet and as our voting to use for voting. So we'll lower that to 10 million, but it'll be that's what we'll be targeting. So once those 10 million get voted and the BPs get voted back in, we should be at activation. So we'll see how that works. Right now, we really only have about 12 external, I think at last count, BPs. So all of you who've joined, I really appreciate that. I know with these restarts, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So one more, hopefully, and then we'll get to the mainnet as well. Next week, there are a lot BPs out there who haven't joined. I'm going to be pushing some of our wallets to get those nodes up and running. Some of them haven't been involved in the community yet, so you'll be seeing some new faces maybe come into the Telegram channel there. So that's the goal. And again, I think I'll just go through these slides, and then at the end is probably best just to open the questions at the end. Let's see. Oh yeah, the one thing we've done as well for this update, and I could bring it up here, is so we KC migrated out. So our main repo now, as you know, we were working on an internal GitHub, which was called Davix.io, and we've actually migrated. Our FIO is our main repo for the blockchain. It's been migrated out to FIO Protocol, which all of you should have access to. If you don't, let me know. So you can start to see all of our commits. This will make it a lot easier for those of you who want to be following our code updates to follow them, and it'll be a lot easier for me to reference, and we can do PRs and start the real process there. So I'm glad to get out there. This is the road to getting all of this foundation run, open sourced, the whole 9 yards there. So again, if you look into it and have questions or anything's missing, let me know. But everything will be building from that for the next testnet restart as well. And Bowden's been in the loop on all of this as well. I mentioned we do have a process for FIO Genesis. Again, Seal, this is internal still, so I still am migrating some items over to FIO Protocol. But we've been working just some of the mainnet launch steps. We're trying to, and I can, maybe what I'll do is just kind of put this out. If I don't have it posted out to FIO Protocol, I could just make a PDF of this or something like that and throw it out to the group. But we're going through some steps. This is really just the Genesis steps. Some of the important stuff for us is we have a lot of files that we're doing these loads of domains and addresses and locking. A lot of the, in the FIO protocol, a lot of the tokens that get issued at first are actually locked up on a schedule and can't be voted. Some are locked up on a schedule that can be voted, so it's fairly complex. We will be posting or are posted out there. I could look on FIO protocol. If, I don't know, Casey, if we've posted out, not yet. So we'll have all this posted out and it should be public because the BPs are going to need to obviously validate everything. So that's where we're getting to. And I don't need to go through all of this. I think I went through the changes. And I think we've had some of our Igor has looked at this as well. Just the 10 million activation is going to be different. And we're going to be using the foundation account probably for a lot of the faucet and things like that. The next piece I wanted to go through, and again, we'll just open up questions for all of this at the end. The next piece I wanted to go through was if you were on the last meeting, I did go through some of the fixes we had put in place. So this regards performance and security issues we've been putting in place regarding resource management. And again, a paragraph at the top, I could read it maybe for this group, just to be clear on where we're standing and what we're doing. It might be helpful. So FIO's implemented a fee-based model, which most of you know, in which staking for resources was deemed not necessary, as every action has a fee which is assumed to be sufficient to cover the cost of the resource. During testing, a number of vulnerabilities have been found to utilize resources without paying a fee. So that's the big fear within a fee-based model on an EOS-IO-based blockchain, which is what happens if someone subverts or gets around the actions which we think are covered by fees. What can be the impact to RAM? Even if the transactions are invalid, can they bloat RAM or can they bloat the transaction log? So even though all the known issues have either been patched already or being worked on, so a lot of those from that last meeting we discussed were patches to the existing structure, really locking down on which actions can be called, making sure everything has a set fee, making sure there's floating fees for the things that need it. All of that was put in place, but we decided that a higher level solution utilizing EOS-IO resource management has been identified and as a required solution to mitigate potential future uncovered vulnerabilities. So the unknown unknowns. And Luke can talk more about this. He was very involved in this discussion and pushing it hard, which is good. Was that,
yeah, maybe just give a little comment on that. Like basically, instead of setting up these accounts with basically unlimited resources, we kind of put limits on the accounts and put limits on what they can do, and then from there kind of went through and figured out a way to say, okay, well, now that you have these limits, how do you kind of obviously increase them as someone's legitimately using fees to pay for things so that they don't run into that kind of arbitrary kind of stopgap. And the idea is we're going to be able to monitor this stuff very closely so that if we actually do see an account hitting these limits and we start seeing, log entries and errors saying, hey, wait, essentially that is an indicator that either one, the fees are wrong and the block producers should take action to adjust the fees appropriately, or two, there's a bug and someone's actually doing something that the fee model is not preventing them from doing, which it really should. And because those limits should never be hit. And that eventually, hopefully the idea being that gives us some time as block producers to respond quickly, roll out and test a patch. And so instead of, the block log or the state log or state file being, gigs and gigs of data before we can respond, there's that limit. So maybe they're, if somebody's attacking the chain, they're creating accounts and they're hitting that limit on each account they create. And sure, it would be a challenge, but at least it's not completely run away. So that was the theory behind it. Again, we work with block trades, we work with crypto lines, we work with a bunch of different people on these different solutions. You guys can check them out as well. Basically, all the latest code commits a lot of them been focused on this. And so far, the feedback we've gotten seems like this is an adequate solution for now. We may have to explore more advanced resource management in the future related to how we do the fees and all that. But it so far looks like a good stopgap.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So this is we consider this a solution for mainnet, right? We have timing. We got to get mainnet going and out the door and get it used to get some momentum building. Our intention, I agree, Luke, is to revisit RAM again. So the biggest discomfort is, okay, we took out staking and this whole idea of unlimited resources makes everyone uncomfortable. We've done a lot to lock down the actual transactions on all the fees, but now we have put in these new RAM, CPU, and net limits. And that gets us, I think, to mainnet. And like you said, I think everyone's fairly comfortable with that, Luke. But there is also the thinking that we do need to bring back, we've evolved our thinking on the resource management as well. And how do we bring that back in a more robust manner as well? And that is definitely on the plate. So,
and just real quick, I'd add to that as well, even just the concerns about no staking related to governance, even just that the liquid tokens just be moved around like crazy to vote for people. We're seeing a very interesting example of that right now in the Steam community where, even exchange tokens were locked up and used for voting. So there are many angles to this that we're definitely going to keep evolving and looking at, but we've got to make progress, got to move forward.
Yep. And again, after I go through this, the dev group's on the line. If you want to get into more specific questions, we can give you answers for what's actually happening out there in the code. So yeah, so just very briefly, the RAM. So what we decided was every new account actually will not have the unlimited RAM, as Luke mentioned, but we'll have an initial RAM allocation. And what's going to happen is every time someone pays a fee, so we don't want them to run out of that RAM allocation, and we also don't have the ability to stake for RAM. So what are we going to do? Really, what we're doing is kind of putting a ceiling on the ability to take up RAM way without fees, and putting a ceiling on it. So every time you actually pay a fee, will increase that RAM allocation. So there's a lot of issues with that you probably could figure out, because we're not actually decrementing RAM and we're not managing RAM the way we need to, which is again what we need to get to. But I think for the initial 3 to 6 months, this will cover us as a stopgap for those security on RAM. So every time an account pays a fee, it'll increase that account's RAM, and it'll be permanently increased. So eventually we do have to do a lot of RAM management there. And then there's just some, just for the multi-action, obviously we need to increase RAM a little bit more. And the initial allocation is such that users need to be able to do large transactions without a ceiling hitting that ceiling from the beginning. And I think what we put in there is something like 25,000 or something like that. So I think the ceiling will work for that. CPU and net. Again, for net, we'd actually already done quite a few updates on that, where we defined the max transaction sizes actually for every transaction, because we're able to clearly identify every transaction because we have a contained protocol. We were able to actually figure out what those transaction size should be, put a buffer on it, and not allow that to go over. So that prevents the goals there has been trying to figure out all those holes where someone could even have invalid transactions and put stuff into the transaction log that makes replay a pain, right? So when you're trying to pull it back in. So I think we've done that, and we did add this max transaction size as well. For the CPU, we put a global cap on transactions at the time of about 50,000 microseconds. So we're still playing with that and testing that. But again, these are ceilings, so it's just not unlimited, so someone can't bring down the system. Again, what we can do is open this up for questions for the team if anyone has any thoughts or questions on it. That's about all I had, Luke, for this piece. And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I would say on that the global cap, that was when we kind of talked back and forth, and to some degree, it's kind of a wet finger in the air, and as Eric was saying, it's really just kind of this, it's better than infinity kind of a thing. Yeah. But that said, I know we got some great experts on the call here and in our community. So if you guys, as you're looking at the type of transactions as part of the FIO protocol. As you're looking through that, if you find some concerns there, we've done some extensive testing. The team has been really hammering on this to see if there's any problems with that. But if you see any concerns, let us know. Obviously, we could even probably tighten that up even a little bit, but it's one of those things that we want this to work. And we things that we didn't plan for. So that's why we're putting some limits in here. And yeah, if you want to pause now, Eric, for some questions about this specifics, or do you have more you want to go through? Or?
No, that's it. Yeah, I'd say either, on the restart, on the testnet restart, like if there have been issues that we need to work out to make that smoother for BPs, Bowden's, I think Bowden's on the line or Roman's on the line, so we can answer those questions, or specifically about the updates that have happened. Yeah, either one. Let's open it up.
All right. So yeah, I think with the restarts being this close to mainnet, I think it's going to be really important on this particular restart that we're all in alignment and we can really jump on it as quickly as possible. So, I'm going to ask maybe for a little bit of social pressure, if that's okay. If you guys are friends in this community, other people that are running nodes. If you see someone, haven't got their node back up and running, give them a friendly ping and be like, hey, notice your node's not up. When you think you're going to get that up, we got to help FIO out, make this thing happen. I think it would just be so encouraging and really good to see if this goes without a hitch and we get back to those initial 12 plus the more that are coming on board. That would just be really encouraging if we could do that quickly. Eric, I think what would help for that is to just have like a hard date as soon as you guys are, I know Tuesday is many different things to many different people based on their time zone.
Yeah.
So just as close as we can get to, the sooner we can say, okay, we've got a build, we've run it locally, we're confident with it. Let's set a time at this date. We are shutting down testnet, and the sooner we can get that data out to the community, I think the better. And then and let's try to hold to that. So like if you all are available as close to that time as possible, I'm not asking you to get up at 3 a.m. unless you want to, but whatever that time ends up being able to quickly restart the chain would be great. And then we could even start those validations, make sure those balances are what we expect, all that good stuff.
Yep.
For all blockchains, Luke, I really love the idea of a sort of block producer code of conduct to just say what their expected behaviors are, because it differs from chain to chain. For example, Eric just went over a list of potential vulnerabilities. So like you can just say that block producers will be expected to make whatever changes they need to make sure that fees cannot be bypassed. And that'll sort of set a precedent that these are the rules. Because on other chains like the EOS mainnet, it would be completely taboo to like change something based on an exploit, where the code is the law.
Roman, you're exactly hitting it the nail on the head as far as what our conversations have been, especially the last 2 weeks with everything we're seeing in DPoS with Steam, and that's actually we've had some pretty intense debates within our with the executive team at DAPX and me participating in those. It's been, if an exploit happens, right, and you get a terabyte in the block log, well, clearly that's going to be a problem for people, right, to replay the chain. And if we as a community set initial essentially guidelines, rules, constitution, whatever you want to call it, and say, look, this is how this chain is going to run. If you want to participate in this chain, you're agreeing to these rules. And that might include saying, as of this block, everything that happened after, you might have to, we might have to lose that, and you might have to remap some addresses. Now that's kind of what I've been thinking at so far, going, what would be that type of situation where I'd make that recommendation to the board, then the FIO board would come out with a recommendation to the block producers, and then the block producers would say, okay, guys, here's what we need to do. Are we going to do it or not? What would that look like from a governance standpoint? That's a very tricky thing, because here's the reality of this chain. Let's say I own this Luke at Stokes, or Luke at Edge, or whatever. I own Luke at Stokes at this point. The exploit happens here. Block log goes crazy, or state file, whatever, and we're like, holy mo, this is bad. It's so bad that we need to restart, fork the chain basically to save the chain. We fork the chain, and then on that new chain, I sell Luke at Stokes to someone else, right? And then all of a sudden that gets forked off. But the person who legitimately knows nothing about what's going on is just sitting in their wallet. They transfer a domain to somebody else, and then somebody else goes and buys a Lamborghini with that, right? So what happens when you restart the deal, right? Well, that Luke at Stokes is now mapped to the old address, and they get the Lamborghini money, not the new person who's supposed to get the Lamborghini money. So it's a seriously important thing on our particular chain to get these things right. And so one potential idea I was kind of throwing around would be you essentially fork out the bad transactions, if we could even clearly define what those are, and somewhat replay the other transactions under the, under the EOS house, basically the system permissions. And essentially that would get us to a restarted chain. And also too, we've even talked about the idea of freezing the chain, essentially, where the block producer nodes would essentially not allow anything to hit, just deny all, essentially, and as a mechanism to prevent, under a worst case scenario, to prevent an attack from completing, and also giving us time to figure out how we're going to recover from an attack. These are all things that David has been working on, some documents as far as from the DAPIX position, what they're recommending. I'm thinking through some ideas as well. And we have a whole, Pravo can talk about, we have an item for disaster recovery as far as our recommendations and how we're going to respond. But you're exactly right, Roman. And I know I'm not the smart enough person to figure this all out, right? So this is going to be something that we can come together as a community. We already have some experience with attempts at things like ECAF that didn't work out so well. So I'm hoping we can learn from that and have a better process going forward for what we want this to be. And ultimately, again, this is a little bit different than EOS Mainnet and Steam in that this is a consortium. These are the industry level players in the space. They're going to want some level of security on this protocol that they're integrating into their main business, their product and service, right? Things will get recovered quickly when things go off the rails, and that we've put in the proper safeguards to ensure that they don't go off the rails, right? So, this is the reason why we have the block producer reserve sitting in there. So you guys are going to hopefully be paid well, no matter how much the token, how much is going on, so that you can actively be participating and be incentivized well to do so. On top of that, the foundation's got 10% of all the tokens, used for paying for fees, adding, new addresses, doing, big promotions and campaigns. And again, 85% of those fees goes to you guys. So I think there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of incentive to pay attention to all this closely. But at this point, Roman, it's one of the most important questions. I don't have full answers yet, and we're gonna have to work it out together, essentially.
Well, and I'm behind Luke on that. Is like you mentioned, we have that document going. We need that response plan. It's a governance response plan, technical response plan, right? BP response plan. I'll try and commit to getting a draft out maybe to this group next week. So maybe we can talk early next week on it and get a good draft going, and then make it more collaborative with the group on how to respond. I think we'll know a lot more once we have that out.
Yeah, and we can learn from the space. There's so many examples where it's like, Vitalik and Dan Larimer and other people have said, well, if it's this much of the, even on Steam, there was X percentage of the accounts got hacked. It was even including Ned Scott's and Dan Larimer's got hacked at one point. And they made a change. They made a unilateral decision, essentially. I think it was hard fork 9, where they, fixed it, essentially. And so I think at the time, the argument used was X percentage of, funds lost, we're going to call a hack that we need to fork and fix. A smaller percentage of funds lost, we're going to call a bounty to, the hacker. Well done. You get paid for exploiting a weakness. Sorry for the people who got screwed, but ultimately we're going to decide it's not worth doing. So essentially creating the rules for when an Ethereum classic moment happens is, I think, kind of what we're talking about. Is just to explain, if these type of things happen, here's how we're going to respond. At least that's, and again, I'm just representing the foundation. Ultimately, it's up to you guys, right? We're gonna put out some guidance. We're definitely gonna have some recommendations, and I'm gonna hope that they're good, that we work with you all to make that. But ultimately, the code you run is gonna define it. So I'm hoping there's gonna be this great synergy. And if there's a disagreement there, then that's part of the process of communication. We can figure it out, saying, hey, we can improve it this way. And if it gets to a point where it's like we've got this nice consensus majority and someone else is a loud minority saying, no, this is bad, you guys can't do this, this is wrong, we're going to have, as a group of a community, we're going to have to decide, well, then maybe this chain isn't one that you want to produce on, right? So these are kind of things that we can work out together, I hope. Great question, though. Thank you. Any other questions about kind of the restart on Tuesday or the security fixes that we've been working on and putting in place? Any other general questions about the protocol itself? Partnerships we got going on, anything like that?
Just to confirm, because I don't think you've had a lot of confirmation yet, restart on Tuesday is fine for me. Just to give the heads up, yes, that's okay.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that would be good for us to at least ask, right? We're just assuming you all are just going to take your Tuesday and restart your servers, right? And unfortunately, we're moving so fast. We're getting to that point where we don't have the luxury of, spacing things out a whole lot.
I'll bite on your suggestion for questions. What is one of the most interesting partnerships about which you're able to share with us?
Oh yeah, I guess that was kind of a teaser question, huh? Because there are certain things that we can share and can't share. Maybe David, you can swing that one. Dapex has been involved in a lot of these communications early on. If there's any, I mean, you guys know we have 28 wallet partners, and there's a on-chain mechanism to give them their kind of user integration bounty within 7 months. And this is actually something that correct me if I'm wrong, Pablo, but I believe the foundation makes that final decision about releasing those tokens. Is that right? Oh, no, it doesn't.
That's right. Yeah, the foundation basically have to attest that the wallet has launched an integration, and that basically makes those tokens available. They're still locked, but they are then available to the wallet.
So if you go to the FIO Foundation website, and you can kind of see all those members and partners that are involved now, they have a very strong incentive to complete their integrations.
So
I think,
yeah, the question was interesting, which gives me a lot of flexibility because the word interesting can be interpreted in a lot of ways. I would probably have to say the most interesting has been our relationship with Binance. Obviously Binance is the 1,000-pound gorilla in the space, and it's huge to have them as an investor in the project and backing what we're doing. It's been interesting to learn how to best interact with Binance because it is a pretty big organization, and yet they also operate fairly decentralized, which makes it at times challenging, and other times it actually makes things better because there's less bureaucracy. So that's, from an interesting standpoint, I'd say that's probably been the most interesting in terms of our relationships. It's obviously one that ultimately is very impactful for what we're doing here. But we're thrilled with all of your guys' involvement, with our FIO members, the fact that we have a half dozen wallets that already are working on their integrations. A couple of them are pretty much done. This is in advance of mainnet. It just makes us that much more motivated to wake up every morning early and work hard.
Yeah, you actually reminded me, David. I was going to reach out to you, Aaron, and the Greymass team about the Anchor wallet. We talked about it yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to send you guys a message. So now that we're on a recorded call, what a great time to call you out and ask you. But I was just curious what the status was on that. As far as, I think last we talked, you thought maybe potentially there'd be a version of that might be available to the community by mainnet. It would really be a beautiful voting experience if that's the case. So I'm just curious if you want to give everyone an update.
Sure. We are, the only reason at this point we haven't released the 1.0 in general for, all EOSIO chains, not just this specifically, is because we're going through some rebranding right now. And that'll take just a little bit longer, but in the meantime, we're also working on the integration directly for this chain. And we've hit some interesting snags with how EOS.js works, which is what we use a lot for some of our stuff, which we had a conversation last week about this too, about how the prefix to the keys has caused some minor headaches.
Yeah, the pub key 1 issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of working through some of that right now, and just making it so that the system itself is aware that fees need to be in existence and that keys are different and all these other things. I'm hoping we'll have kind of a prototype version soon. We haven't started touching the mobile side of things, and honestly, we really haven't even announced our mobile side of things yet, but specifically for this chain. But that is kind of in the cards at some point too, just as kind of an explanation of that. The mobile that we're working on is kind of a competitor to the block one reference authenticator. It uses our signing protocol. The experience, honestly, I feel is much better, and we hope it kind of takes over the standard, but that's a lot of hope in that statement. We'll see where that goes, but we do hope to have at least the Anchor 1.0 release with FIO support built into it by the time mainnet launches. And it just kind of depends on how many more hurdles that we run into.
Exciting.
If that, yeah.
You heard it here. We just made this call juicy. That's awesome. Thank you for that update, Aaron. I really appreciate that. Yeah, because and as soon as we can start help testing with that, absolutely, we'd love to see access to playing with it on the testnet or something along those lines. Would be brilliant. We talked yesterday, and I think we are moving forward with the we're going to put together instructions on using the Clio, so that people can, the different people that want to vote can vote right at mainnet. Obviously, that's really important. But I'm hoping that's going to end up being the backup. I'm really hoping that tools like that, and I know we're talking with Scatter as well, and they're working on some ideas. We actually have, Eric, we didn't give much of an update, but we have a block explorer that we kind of found online, an open source one that we've been hacking together to work with FIO, and so the idea of, would it be possible to even kind of hack together some voting on that using Scatter? So we're hoping to have multiple options. But again, as we said, and I think I mentioned to you guys in Telegram a couple weeks back, how ironic and poetic would it be if EOS Voter comes once again to save the day, like it did for EOS mainnet launch, where it was like, there's no tools to vote, there's no easy tools, and you guys came along, and it was just great. Everyone just like, here we go, we've got a tool to vote now. That would just be beautiful if Anchor could do that again. But thank you again. That's awesome. It's really good update, really good news. I look forward to testing it and working it out. And also too, Eric, I don't want to speak for DAPX or your dev team, but if it gets to the point where, maybe some more resources could be helpful to push that along, I think, that might be something we would see a need to prioritize.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Excellent.
Definitely loop us in if we can help.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. I love putting people on the spot and they don't get upset about it. It's a good advertisement for what you guys have been doing. Great work. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, now's the time, you guys. Go ahead.
One thing we'd like to start testing some of our tools on the network, and I'm just curious if there's a kind of a want or need for example, the benchmarks.
Oh my gosh, yes. Your guys' benchmarks are amazing. Heck yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if it really applies here or not.
Oh, no, it absolutely does. I mean, I think in my mind, the foundation is going to be wanting stuff like that in order to make recommendations on who the technically excellent block producers are that they kind of support or promote. And yeah, I mean, so Nate, some of the other things that I was talking about earlier about being able to monitor if certain accounts are hitting these thresholds, like if there's an attack of something, I would love to see the great tools you guys have built even extended a little bit further to kind of monitor specific FIO type stuff. That would be great. Sure. That would be fantastic.
Okay.
I guess that kind of opens up. I'll go for it.
I was just going to say we could definitely look into stuff like that as well, and our reliability tool with the tracker bot and stuff on Telegram, we can start setting that up on testnet and make sure it works.
Oh, that'd be great.
We'll do that probably with this next reboot.
I guess that kind of
bring that up.
Opens up the question of some of the custom contracts that are required to do things like benchmarking, and like our wallet uses a custom contract, and is that going to be available on like an approval basis to actually deploy some of these utility contracts within the chain, or is that still going to be locked down?
Wow, that's a really good question. That has not actually been brought up at all in our discussions, and that's a fantastic question. I think it's one of those things that, having a foundation, which EOS Mainnet doesn't have, also EOS Mainnet is obviously kind of an open platform. So it's like, you can do whatever you want. But in this case, being a closed platform, having a foundation that has its own board that eventually, as you guys know, is going to run as a DAC, a decentralized autonomous consortium, so that there's going to actually be participation from the community. Those would be like, I would imagine that would be a proposal that could be actually put within the DAC saying, here's a multi-sig, you guys here, you can see the code, here it is. Do you want to deploy it or not, as basically a feature upgrade to FIO. And I think since FIO is designed to kind of serve this consortium of, crypto endpoints, wallets, exchanges, payment gateways, everything in between, I think it's going to be in its best interest to create standards, really open standards. So like I know, Aaron, you guys have some tools like where we're tracking different tokens and, different things like that. It would be great to look at some of those tools you guys have and ensuring that they're very generic so that they would serve the entire FIO ecosystem. I think that would probably be my recommendation as I think through something like that, as opposed to being a product specific utility, for a specific product. But like your example, Nate, is pretty good one, and that is like, this is a service for the whole foundation, for the whole community. With yours, Aaron, it would probably be good to look through specifically what's needed there and how that might serve any wallet that wants to integrate with FIO, not just necessarily your product. I think that's my current stance on it, but that's a really great question. Really good one.
Yeah, and another example I'd throw out is the producer JSON contract that we set up ages ago, and other chains have just now deployed for wallets to be able to pull information about producers, like as they're deciding who to vote for.
Yes, no, that is definitely one that I would highly recommend we deploy. Again, we've been so focused on bug fixes, major security concerns, like those type of things haven't even gone into our consciousness. I haven't been like, hey guys, let's do that. I've talked about the producer JSON to the team before and they're like, wait, what? And so I haven't even really brought that up. And just to get you guys up to speed, Eric and the team at Dapix, we have you've got your registered producers and they have their website in there. And then there's just kind of this community standard that you run this bp.json or chains.json. You have these different files sitting on your web server, but the data can also be put and updated on chain, which is based on a contract that that was deployed and has been really useful as well. So yeah, I would think, again, ultimately, guys, this is going to be your chain. So, you guys have full control. If you decide it's useful, I would just recommend having that nice relationship with the foundation. So instead of it's just like, wait, the FIO BPs are doing whatever, you could have this nice coordinated communication to all the stakeholders, all the industry leaders and everything else, so that the foundation could say, hey, here's I think we call them foundation or a FIO improvement protocol, the FIP, you could set one of those up and say, yeah, we'd like to do this. Foundation could say, yeah, that's so great. We fully support it. Here's the data that's going to be rolled out. Here's the documentation for how to work it. Here's the code review to make sure there's no security concerns or performance concerns, and just have it really organized so that all the industry participants will kind of prepare for this, almost like a, professional technology consortium, right? So yeah, I think it'd be great to have that nice communication for those type of rollouts.
Awesome.
Great questions, guys. Thank you. All right, so we got about, I think, another 15 minutes here. Anything specific for the dev team or for the Dapix? Again, Dapix is our kind of primary service provider, and we hope yourselves and others will step up to actually contribute to code, and hopefully we'll have eventually a worker proposal system where that will be organized on chain so that you can actually get paid for your efforts and things of that nature from the foundation. But yeah, any questions for the Dapix team or for me or anything else?
If possible, server question perhaps. I saw a PDF earlier with the expected specs needed to run a block producer, and the RAM requirements were pretty hefty. I've just read in the slides that there are substantial RAM reducements and improvements being done. Do you know how that changes the required specs for the servers?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because those RAM requirements are based on, and Pavo, we've talked about this as well, kind of what our estimates are for usage, right? So it's a tough one, because if the foundation, has control over a lot of, Luke, you could be putting out a lot of addresses, right? Free addresses. And if those get heavily used, you could get up into the millions very quickly, right? Of addresses and blockchain data, mappings of public crypto getting put on there. So I don't know, like, what are you looking at? We also have a new page out there. So I don't know if you have an old one, but yeah, I don't know if that does modify that. That's kind of the high end there. So I don't know if it's a question of maybe I need to update that to say, here's kind of a min expected and then a ramp up type schedule. How how do BPs usually handle RAM as it grows? Like, is it better to start small? I mean, you don't want to hit a ceiling too quickly, right? So how can I accommodate that on a good schedule, I guess, would be my question.
From my point of view, if the minimum and expected requirements would definitely be great. I saw it in a PDF earlier, where there was a redundant proposal for the setup for BPs. I think it maybe ties into what was said earlier about performance testing. If you have a benchmark, that can be used to determine the actual recommended specs.
Yeah, I think it's the document you sent out talking about the kind of expected BP pay. I think there was some language in there about assumptions of usage and RAM. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, how I've managed stuff on Steam and EOS, you know, is just you monitor things closely and you kind of get a baseline for, okay, it seems to be this is what's happening over time. You know, I've got, like, on my Steam server, I get an email every day that actually tells me how much RAM is left on my servers. You know, just every day I'm just monitoring that, so I can kind of plan going, okay, pretty soon I got to get, you know, upgrade my RAM. I think as it relates to the foundation doing big integrations that could potentially be, you know, hundreds of thousands or even millions of address giveaways, for example, obviously I want to coordinate that with you guys in the community. Like, we're not going to, if the token price is not reflecting that active usage and you guys aren't being really well compensated to upgrade your infrastructure as needed to support, you know, the growing network, then clearly, you know, that would be a concern, right? So we're definitely going to coordinate that together. Having open conversations would be my perspective on that.
Yeah, I can take another cut. I mean, I didn't want to underestimate too much, right? But yeah, it's just trying to come up with what does that usage look like when it's very broad curve, right? A very broad curve. So
maybe one thing that might be helpful, Eric, is, like, we already know that there's a pre-sale with X number of, was it 10,000 or so addresses?
we could just kind of, yeah,
just say this
benchmark.
is this much RAM right now. So if you were to ramp it up, that's what RAM you're going to have at that time period.
Yeah, I could even publish out the model we're using. People can play with it themselves, right? I mean,
yes, we talked about that being a tool that block producers could use at one point, the Excel file. That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, that may be the easiest way. That way you can kind of play it with it yourself, what you think's realistic, and then we can put out what we think's going to be realistic. And like you said, if there's going to be a large number of addresses put out into the field, we can be vocal about that and everyone can keep an eye on it as well. It's a good idea, Luke. All right.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if we're like, hey, we're about to add, you know, based on our calculations, you know, 2 gigs of RAM to, you know, the network over the next, you know, day that we roll this out, clearly that would be a communication we want to have with you guys.
Yeah, let me take, I'll put out, we also have a new page on those RAM expectations as well out on our Dev Hub. So let me make sure that's up to date, and then I'll send the link out to everyone and figure that out and try and publish that model.
Cool. And also too, if there are token prices listed in those models, please know that's completely, we're not making any suggestion about what the token price may be. We may even zero that out and you can put whatever number you want in there as you get it. Just to be clear, we're not making any predictions on what the future token price may be.
Now, of course not. We're just looking at the specs, and those in themselves are impressive. So yeah, any update of that would be nice, but I'll do some testing as well on testnets. Could be good to predict some real numbers.
Yeah, we'll do Matthias.
All right, fantastic. And just to mention it, if you do need to do some serious testing on testnet, you know, as a nod to your fellow members here, just maybe give them a heads up. I was hearing about, Michael was saying the other day, he gave Jungle a little run for his money on EOS recently, and so yeah, it's just good. You know, it's always good to do some testing for sure. But if you find an exploit or something of that nature, just, you know, let us all know before you take it down. Just because we're so close to mainnet, we don't want to slow it down unnecessarily.
Quick heads up that servers might explode. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Well, I think we got another 10 minutes. We can end earlier if anyone else has any other questions. Again, I really appreciate all you guys' time. It's great to have so many people on the call. We did record the previous one and put it up on YouTube. We'll record this one as well, and we'll put it up there. So, yeah, and again, we're still looking for block producers. We're still looking for partners in the space. So anybody who's running a crypto-enabled endpoint that has a user interacting with cryptocurrency, definitely let them know about FIO. It's a pretty exciting time. All right, with that, I guess we'll come to a close. Sound good?